Hello boys and girls, Lord Hawkeye here again for one last little look back on the ever-changing world of Azeroth before we get into the new expansion coming soon. So, with World of Warcraft now drawing in a broader audience than ever dreamed, it was decided the game needed to do a bit of a better job of welcoming them. With that, Blizzard did something quite shocking. They revamped the old world. Both main continents were redone in the aftermath of the Cataclysm caused by the awakening of Deathwing, who would act as the new villain for the expansion. This was a perfect opportunity to wipe away the mistakes of old and start new players with a clean slate. Gone were the endless back and forth trips across zones, the uneven level spreads, the experience humps, the NPCs who seemed to make it their goal in life to be as inconveniencing as possible. Yes, Cenarian Circle, I'm looking at you. As I waited for the expansion to come, I spent my time getting my Lore Master title and did all the new content. Really. And I loved it. It really showed how proper storytelling can make even the most mundane task fun when done right. So I was excited to meet the new expansion for even more. Today, color me underwhelmed. Now, don't get the wrong idea. I'm not one of the throngs of doomsayers bleating about how this expansion ruined the game. Seriously, there's been a group of those in every single one without exception, and I have no doubt there will be in Pandaria too. Folks, you really need to find something better to do with your time. Moaning incessantly is not healthy. Anyways, let me explain. Cataclysm did offer some enjoyable leveling content. Vashir was a treat for the eyes, though sadly the zone was a ghost town after everyone had done it due to there being no reason to go back. Its plot, however, felt restrictive and even bordered on Deus Ex Machina at times. Every victory you gained was swiftly undone by the Naga with minimal effort. You left the zone feeling like you might as well have not even been there, and that's really not a good way to end a story for a player. Mount Hyjal was a zone with a great history behind it, and to have a fight with Ragnaros in the finale really was quite unexpected. Uldum, I loved the Indiana Jones-esque questline and found the references hilarious, but ironically, the Tol'vir, those zone's natives, are probably the dullest race in all of Azeroth. Their questline story was forgettable and really amounted to little in the end. They are never seen outside Uldum, and they don't participate in any way in helping the forces of good against Deathwing. Then came the final zone, Twilight Highlands. Twilight Highlands did have its share of memorable moments when questing, but coming from Northrend, it just didn't feel as oppressive. The Twilight cults just don't have the menace to them that the Scourge did, and they only control a small portion of the zone, so you don't get the sense of being in enemy territory as much as you did with Icecrown. The first set of raids, however, were a strong set. The Throne of the Four Winds pit us against Alakir, who was a solid enough fight, but his character felt really underrepresented in the storyline. He's barely mentioned in the questing zones, and his influence is little, if anything. Blackwing Descent was an interesting side trip, obviously intended to provide some nostalgia to players who had fought Nefarian and Onyxia. Now they were together and out for revenge. Nefarian, sadly though, was more frustrating than enjoyable as a fight, so most people didn't ever go back to it after they cleared it. The best of the three was easily the Bastion of Twilight, the home of the Twilight Hammers operation, where the players would fight the mad ogre Cho'Gall in the end. Of the three major lore characters fought in this tier, I greatly preferred Cho'Gall. He by far had the strongest influence in the story, making several personal appearances, including one in a low-level zone, so his fight was a great way for him to go out. So far, Cataclysm was a mixed bag. When it was good, it was very good, but other times it felt watered down somewhat. Sadly, the missteps became more common with the next tier of raiding, which... oh. Okay, the next patch didn't have any raids at all. But it had two new dungeons. Or rather, it had two revamped old dungeons, Zul'Gurub and Zul'Aman, neither of which I had much of a particular fondness for back in their heyday. Yeah, I wasn't enjoying myself during these times, and I took many breaks from the game. Zul'Aman suffered from dated mechanics, it way overstayed its welcome, and it brought back bad memories of overly long and repetitive trash from Burning Crusade. Zul'Gurub was changed more, and thus this was the stronger of the two, despite containing a final boss that resulted in me kicking more party members than I ever had before. And this was all before we got to... this is all we got for 4.1. I was really quite displeased, and I wasn't alone in that sentiment. Thankfully, it only could improve from there. How much, though, was another matter. Next came the Firelands, where Ragnaros was planning his part in the destruction of Azeroth. Like many before, this patch created a questing hub that would grow and evolve as you got further into the story, and I have to say, this one was the best yet, with many interesting characters and storylines, and the quests offering enough variations that they never got boring or repetitive. As for the raid itself, I have to admit I barely played it at all. Really, to me, it was just Molten Core version 2, and just really didn't do it for me. Most people who raided I know found it to be decent, but I just thought the nostalgia value was starting to get past its expiration date at this point, which is why I'm grateful the third patch didn't go down that road. Finally came the Hour of Twilight. Like Wrath, it contained 3 dungeons to tell a story setting to set the scene for the final raid, Dragon Soul. One last plan to defeat Deathwing involved retrieving the Dragon Soul from the distant past and using it to strike the fatal blow to Deathwing. Dragon Soul was a change in formula as far as raids go, in that it wasn't some villain's stronghold where the final boss waited patiently for you. It instead was a series of events leading up to the final showdown, which resulted in a much more varied raid than the previous, and I really quite liked it personally. I personally didn't feel up to the dedicated raiding at this point, so I only did the Raid Finder version, which I do actually like a lot, and I'm glad to see they'll be having more of in Mists of Pandaria. The final cutscene after the defeat of Deathwing was a source of controversy. The 4 dragon aspects burned all their power in the fight and are now mortal. I won't go into too much detail because I already did that on another vid, but I personally did find the ending quite meaningful, and I don't really understand where everyone's confusion lies. Cataclysm was a hit and miss expansion. It's often described as a revolution rather than an evolution, which is true in many ways, but in others, I felt it ran with ideas that didn't pay out as hoped. Much of that undoubtedly came with so much time and energy being spent on revamping the old world, which was desperately needed, make no mistake. So to sum up, the new world was probably the best thing about Cataclysm. The raids and dungeons were a mixed bag, but the good ones were very good indeed. I do like the greater use of cutscenes and phasings, and I'm pleased to hear we'll have more of that in Pandaria as well. The weak points were the watered-down content and the sad fact that Cataclysm had by far the weakest antagonist yet. Deathwing, no matter how he tried to spin it, just was not near as interesting as a villain as the Lich King. Not even close. He had no character development, and worse yet, he barely was even seen in the game. After the very active role that the Lich King took in the past expansion, that really was disappointing to me, especially how excited people were about fighting this giant world-ending dragon. And that about brings us up to the present. Now we shall face new challenges, and for what I've played of the beta, we can expect much more to come, so I greatly look forward to seeing everyone there. Until then, be aware and be wise.